Hello and welcome to our private pilot course. This is the first lesson, Introduction to Flying, in our series of lessons as part of our private pilot license training course. Before we start learning about the ground school, before we start flying, I think it's important to understand what flying is, what flying was, and the history and the background behind flying. That's exactly what this lesson does. After this lesson, you will be able to explain the background of flying, the history of flying, what were some of the key discoveries, and any history behind the science of flying, and what were the key aviation milestones in the history of flying. We would not be able to cover every minute detail. Obviously, the history of flying is huge. It spans over a few decades, but we will be covering the key learnings or the most important aspects in the history of flying. We'll start with the overview. We'll introduce what the flying, how flying started, how flying evolved, and then the history, and then the scientific research which went behind flying and behind what we see today, behind what the aircraft we see today are. So that would be a brief overview. Flying has always fascinated humans. We always wanted to fly. We were inspired by the birds which fly and the kites which we flew. So humans always thought, why can't we fly? If the birds can fly, why can we not fly? Sure, we do not have wings, but the humans were always, which is we, were always confident about us creating wings for flight, although we were not born with wings. We knew we could fly, but it took us several years basically to realize our dream of flying. There were several stories in the past, in the history, substantiating the fact, but flying has always wondered humans. We always derived inspiration, like I said, from the birds and the kites. As you can see, the structure of the wings of the bird is very similar to human-made or human-created wings on an airplane. They're very similar. The birds flap, they generate lift, they generate the same, they undergo the same aerodynamic forces, and they generate the same aerodynamic forces, except they do that naturally, and we do it artificially through wings on an airplane. That's the difference. But otherwise, if you look at history, the credit of flying goes to Chinese and the Europeans, be it the imaginary mythological characters in Greek history, or be the kites which were invented by the Chinese. Either way, right? Either Greek mythology or the inventions of mankind, which were done by Chinese. The Chinese are also accredited towards creating gunpowder. So, so Chinese and Europeans, I should say, contributed a lot to the history, uh, contributed a lot to the invention when it comes to aviation. So the Greek god, as I typed here, the Greek god Hermes and the Roman god Mercury, that traveled on winged sandals. The Greeks also gave us Pegasus, the winged horse. So basically, this could be a sheer imagination of in Greek history, but still, that imagination laid as a foundation for us to take those dreams forward. As you can see, Leonardo da Vinci, if you talk about the science and scientific research behind the history of aviation, Leonardo da Vinci, the great polymath, the great Italian artist, architect, and whatnot, and is a man of science. He made the first scientific experiment in the field of aviation ever, which is why he deserves a special mention here, Leonardo da Vinci. And like I said before, it would be injustice to cover the entire aviation research or aviation history in a matter of few minutes. However, there were several other personalities who contributed to aviation research initially. However, I picked a few names based on the category of aviation they contributed to. Henry Cavendish, he made the first flammable air, later called hydrogen gas. Otto Lilienthal, he is credited as a father of modern aviation. Montgolfier brothers, they have the credit of coming up with hot air balloons, basically lighter than air. And of course, the definition of aviation would be incomplete without a mention of the ever famous Wright brothers, Orville Wright, Wilbur Wright. The Wright brothers are the first people in history to successfully fly an engine-powered plane. On December 17, 1903, two brothers from Dayton, Ohio, named Wilbur and Orville Wright, they were successful in flying an airplane they built. Their powered aircraft flew for 12 seconds above the sand dunes of Kitty Hawk. Kitty Hawk is in North Carolina, making them the first men to pilot a heavier-than machine that took off on its own power, remained under control, and sustained flight. So it's very important to emphasize on the fact that it was an engine-powered plane, and it was under, for the whole duration of flight, it was under controlled and sustained flight. And again, like I said, there are several others also contributed to aviation research. So this, in very short, brief history of aviation. If you have any questions and feedback, please put in the comments below. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your time.